Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Covey, and once again, a really special guest that we're really looking forward to having a conversation with. Before that, love and appreciation to those who are listening.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Will not be coming out on Monday, but it is Monday. It's been a good one, and we have an awesome guest here. His name is Bobby Hobert. Bobby is a coach and is also the podcast host of It's the Bearded Man podcast. And if you're watching, he does have a phenomenal beard that I've already complimented him once on. That I'll compliment him again. But Bobby, why don't you? First of all, thanks for coming on and for your time and what I'm sure is going to be a lot of wisdom. Why don't you provide an overview of kind of who is Bobby Hobert and how you got to where you are today?
It's a loaded question, but I love it. Appreciate you guys having me here today. And just based on the branding of the podcast, I love it. I love it. And I love what you guys are up to and just seeing the mission you guys are on. So please keep crushing it. Bobby Hobert today, presently, as you kind of hit on, is a content creator, coach with a focus on helping people design their life, more so I'd say towards entrepreneurs. And I guess the high level of how I got to where I am today is 8 years ago, I graduated college outside of Boston. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Went to a top business school, Bentley University, and I went the opposite route of what everyone else was doing, which is I got a full-time job driving for Uber. That was my full-time gig, and I also started a podcast at the time called Purpose in the Youth, and I was focused on finding my passion, finding my purpose. So what I thought was going to be a 3-month gig of driving Uber, building the podcast, turned out to be a 2.5, 3-year journey. So I went from Boston to LA, lived down in LA, drove Uber for another year. And then through the process of the podcast, met the founder of Liquid IV, huge hydration brand now, but back then it was a small startup. And I worked for them for 4 years. And just recently back in January 15th, I left that full-time gig to go all in on coaching and brand partnerships and just my own business. So that's a really high level, but there are so many sub-chapters and lessons and highs and lows in that 8 years. I also feel like there's 6 different versions of me within that
6.
time, which is really exciting and something I've been like thinking about more recently and just encouraging people like you're allowed to have different versions of you, different identities. But present day, man, I'm very grateful also that we're recording this on a Monday because I reflected on my journal today where I'm like, man, it feels so incredibly amazing to wake up today, be excited for the day ahead of me, be excited for the week. And this is truly a dream come true that I've been working on for like the last 8 years. So you're catching me at a really pivotal time, fellas, and I'm just
Dude, I'm
grateful to be
freaking pumped right now. I want to give you a fist bump through the screen.
Let's go.
We'll backtrack kind of on like your journey a little bit, but to talk more about the present day was something you mentioned, like you just quit your full-time job. I mean, just talk through what that process looks like. What kind of feelings or emotions like are arising as you go through that, as you step into the unknown? Like, just talk through that a little bit. I think a lot of people can relate.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to unpack that because even my girlfriend Kate asked me that yesterday when we were out on our Sunday adventure. She's like, "How does it feel?" And I think the best word to describe it is freedom, and not freedom in the sense of like. I just wake up and I take my sweet ass time rolling out of bed and I have a cup of coffee. Like I am just as dialed, if not more dialed in now than I was 2 weeks ago when I was working full time and balancing both the full time gig and this. And I think that's because there's such hyper focus now, right? Like I mastered the skill of going from like full time work to then a quick 20-minute deep dive on personal to then back. Like I mastered that skill of dropping in and out of focus for completely 2 different worlds. But now the fact that I'm so narrow and so all in on just waking up and building on my mission and my business, it really is just so much joy in my life, like truly living real time, like a dream come true. And I think there was those emotions leading up to it where it's like, you have those limiting beliefs of like, is this going to work itself out? And I still have to combat those random thoughts that will kind of appear like the money's going to stop coming. No one's going to work with you as a coach. The brands aren't going to want to work with you. And all that is just a safety mechanism in me that's just trying to caution myself or limiting beliefs that are planted from a million different places. But I feel extremely confident. I have been really living this burn the boats mindset mentality, which is like I had to quit the full-time gig and go all in, because at some point you just have to put yourself in the uncomfortable position to figure it out. And I was comfortable. I had a really great salary. I was hustling on the side with my business, but that's not what I wanted to do. So it was kind of this now or never moment. Like, if I can't jump ship and make it work now, is it, maybe we have to like hit the reset button and redirect where we're going completely. So yeah, I'd say freedom is the best word to describe, but just grateful and excited for kind of what the next few months are looking like.
Yeah, and we talked to a lot of people who've made similar shifts, going from a W-2 job to working for themselves. And it's interesting that you had mentioned how you straight out of school went into like Uber driving and starting a podcast to seek purpose. It seemed like you were more curious and searching for your purpose a lot earlier than, I don't know, a number of different people that I've gotten to meet, and myself included. And just curious, like, when that started. What point was it? In college? Was it before that? Did you already have that curious mind around like, what is the bigger picture point of my life, and what is going to make me most fulfilled in the long term, such that you immediately started to seek that versus, waking up one day at 30 years old and realizing, wait a second, this isn't all, that there is to life?
Yeah, that's a great question, MG. I'm like, I don't want to abuse the word gratitude, but I literally have it like tattooed on my thumb to show people how like obsessed I am with the damn word and just the emotions. But you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, there are some stories and people out there where like they don't have this epiphany till 30, 35, 40, right? And I'm very fortunate that I had this kind of light bulb moment when I was in an internship my junior year of college. That was the moment where I kind of like was like, whoa, everything I thought to be true about success and where I wanted to go in life is absolutely not what I think. So now we need to like recourse correct. And essentially, I was working a marketing internship, and I thought the dream was a fancy car, corporate America, climb the ladder, Rolex, material. Through that internship, I was like, whoa, this is like not the world I want to work in. I don't want to just show up to an office. I want to be passionate about what I do. And so that inspired me going into my senior year of college to just like completely reflect on, what do I want to do after school? And I'm happy I took this approach in my senior year, which was like, I don't know what I'm going to do after college, but the last thing I want to do is like look back on my senior year and be stressed and overwhelmed trying to figure it out. So I told myself, I'm just going to enjoy my senior year and hope I figure it out along the way. In the fall of 2015, I came across the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes. And that was the single podcast decision, like that was the tipping point of just completely giving myself permission to go all in on like my interests and finding my passion and finding my purpose just from the guests that he was having.
Was there a specific episode?
I can't think of a specific episode, but it was, I'd say, Gary Vee in 2015,
he's awesome.
Scooter Braun. Those are the two that really stand out the most. And I was probably Gary Vee. And that was my first experience getting a taste of Gary Vee. And then I was hooked for like the next 2 or 3 years, like daily dose. But I think one thing that kind of was like a good perspective shift for me, or just, I realized what I thought I wanted to do with my life was actually not what I wanted to do. And I was hearing this common theme on the School of Greatness, all these passionate entrepreneurs, creators, just people that were just crushing in their lane of whatever they were doing with their life. And I had this group of friends that I had grown up with, one of which I was best friends with. His name's Dylan Reese. He's a recording artist. And there was like 6 or 7 creators, business guys that I wasn't close with, but they were all like, quote unquote, the oddballs, right? Like one was a photographer, one was a fashion designer, one was a musician. And like everyone outside looking in our hometown, we're like, all right, guys, like you're not going to be anything big. But I saw all these guys like doing something that they were passionate about, and that inspired me as well. So it was a mix of listening to the School of Greatness podcast, auditing my environment, and surrounding myself more with these guys that were really passionate about doing something completely different. And then through that process, that's what led me to start my first podcast, Purpose in the Youth. It was like, love the School of Greatness podcast, but where are all the people in like their late teens, early 20s it doesn't exist. Ooh, I love talking. I love people. I love asking questions. Why not create the thing that I'm looking for in the market that I don't see exist, which is going to help me, is the vehicle for me to figure out my passion and purpose. And if I took any lesson from business school, it was like, survey the market, find something that doesn't exist, create it. And I was like, boom, I'm going to start Purpose in the Youth. So those were the early moments that kind of like all guided me to just saying, yes, let's do this. Let's not get a job, even though I got an email saying 6 months after graduating, 99% of your graduating class is enrolled in a full-time career. And I was finally part of the 1%.
And that's why you should be so grateful, because those are the statistics and the traps that I think a lot of us, and I'll raise my hand, can fall into. And good on you starting from that internship to realize that, hey, this isn't the road for me, and it's passion versus prize, typical story there. But I mean, that light bulb sparked open for me so many times, a few pivotal times, right? Like I went 3 months into an accounting program at DePaul and dropped out in 90 days because I was like, I'm not doing this. I don't care about accounting enough, and tried to go into exercise science, got into a university, and then saw a ton of people talking about their finance internships and how much they're going to make, and making 6 figs straight out of school, and all those statistics started to ruminate. And so it was like, well, I got to be perceived of social status. And so I, again, went into the business route. Not to say the business route's not great. It's just it wasn't totally aligned with my passion. And again, I suppressed that, and I chose to go away from that passion. And it's such obvious advice, but it's something that I think requires so much courage. But also then to look back and just be so grateful that you actually did take those steps when you did. So good on you. Yeah, I don't think you're abusing the word by any means, and pretty cool tattoo.
You can't abuse the word gratitude, man. I mean, some people might get annoyed, but the people that are getting annoyed are the ones that need it the most, or the ones that actually need to figure out what it feels like to actually be grateful for what we do have, and actually really, because I've talked about gratitude a lot, but for myself personally, I always grew up and I'd be like, well, I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm grateful, but there's a difference between saying it and actually really embracing it and feeling it. And when you're able to shift that perspective, I mean, shoot, if I got a tattoo, I don't have one yet, but gratitude would be right up there as something to get. I really do live by that. So Bobby in 2016 versus Bobby in 2024. Talk about those. I mean, you mentioned 6 different versions of you, so maybe don't go through each one, but just kind of talk about how you've evolved as a person, the stuff that you enjoyed doing, what gave you energy before versus what gives you energy now. Just talk through that evolution.
Yeah, the timing of this podcast is so great. I also just put out a post on Friday last week with 2 images side by side of 2016 version of me and then 2024 version of me. So like in that post alone, it was like 2016, I prioritized being the first one in the bar and the last one to leave. 2024, I prioritize going to bed at 9:30 p.m. and having a glass of tea, and I haven't drank in 575 days, right? So these are just little examples, right? And I don't even know if I said 6, it might have been 7, it might be 8 if I really think about it. But like, I think the one thing I've done really, really good at, which it took me that first process of creating an identity for myself, which was like, okay, you're now a college graduate. What do you want the next identity to be? It's like, okay, I'm going to become the podcaster / Uber driver. And I hit that hard for 2 or 3 years, right? And then I evolved to like the guy who moved from Boston to LA. Then I evolved from the guy who's running around LA and getting to know everyone. There was like the LA phase where I just was like raging phase for 2.5, 3 years. Now I'm in like the suburb Bob. I live outside of Austin. My Sundays are spent like taking out the trash and organizing our home, right? So I say that because every chapter, every identity, I have no regrets. It fit me in a time of life when I needed it. I learned from it. It helped me evolve to who I am today. And I think giving myself that permission to like recognize, I don't value this anymore. Let's move on from it. Or this used to bring me a lot of joy, but it no longer brings me joy anymore. So I'm going to get rid of that. I've just allowed myself to flow, and I don't judge myself for it. I think oftentimes people get caught up on who they used to be, so they won't give themselves permission to make that change. I just like move without friction, and I do. And that was a skill that I developed, and I had to develop that when I graduated college and everyone went and got a corporate job. They're spending their weekends partying. I'm seeing on Snapchat, like, them send me snaps in the club, and I'm like the guy on the side of the road driving Uber, bringing them to and from the bar. Like, I had a lot of like whoa moments where I'm like, I'm really completely shifting who I am. So, it's I can tell you right now, like, the 2016 version, is interested of like podcasting and creating. He's starting to like not value partying. He is, neglecting every area of his life except for working. To now the 2024 version of me is like extremely well balanced, working harder than ever, but extremely focused, like quality over quantity, prioritizes wellness, is the best physical, mental, spiritual shape he's ever been in his life. And that's just been the compound effect that started 8 years ago. But it hasn't been like Mr. Perfect through that whole time. Like, there's been these different evolutions, different chapters, different priorities, different interest goals. But
and that's the best part. And that's the best part, Bobby. I'm sorry I cut you off.
Please jump in. No, please.
But is you mentioned like the ability to flow and not judge yourself. Is that ability to give yourself grace and self-compassion. And I think that is just that is one of the most powerful ways that you can show yourself that you love yourself, of self-love, is this idea of self-compassion. And I'm just curious, when you hear that word, what comes up? How has that evolved for you?
Yeah, it's evolved big time, man. I think what like, it's a lot of deep work. It's a lot of stillness. It's a lot of being non-judgmental. I'll tell you what, when I was driving Uber, what most people don't realize is during that chapter of my life, I had so much downtime to think. Because when I'm not driving somebody, right, and I'm on the side of the road waiting for the next ride, I'm just stuck in my own thoughts. Yes, I would listen to podcasts. Yes, I would scroll social media, but like, I wasn't bringing my laptop around. I wasn't pulling up Netflix. Sometimes like I only had 60 seconds in between the ride, so I'd like wouldn't bother like opening any YouTube videos up. I would just sit and wait. And I think through like those early years and then continuing to like every day look to grow 1% better, right? Listening to podcasts, studying people that I was inspired by. All of these things like have led me to just have more self-compassion for myself. And, I actually this morning was writing a podcast script that will come out this Friday. And it's one of the most sensitive topics that I never shared. I've never talked about in 8 years in being a creator. And I'm extremely excited. It's a weird word to say, but I'm ready to like let this go and put this out there to the world. And it's because I'm so non-judgmental to who I am, who I used to be, or like things that have happened to me in the past. Freedom is like, it's the word I keep hitting, right? It's like, to have self-compassion for yourself is to be free of not judging who you used to be, who you are currently, your flaws, your mistakes. It ultimately just allows you to be yourself authentically. And I know when we first started, Matt, you said that, like, I asked, what do you want to get the most from this podcast? And you said, I would just want to have authentic conversations. And when you said that, I was like, perfect, because that's all I've ever known to be true. Double clicking back to Gary Vee. When I heard him in early 2016 talking about be your most authentic self, I've always been my most authentic self via social media or in person. And when you are your most authentic self and you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you give yourself permission to have self-compassion, because you know you're not supposed to be perfect. You know you're not going to be a professional at everything. You know it takes time to become great in anything. And I've been my biggest supporter, my biggest hype man. And I think that's been a huge, huge role in mentally becoming who I am, as well as career.
Yeah, and the idea here is like anyone can do that, just not everyone does it. And usually what it comes back to that we talk about is like not everybody has the courage to challenge the complacency, or not everyone chooses the discomfort of change over the dissatisfaction of status quo. And I'm just curious, like across your versions of yourself, like was there ever a version of yourself where you were like, you know what, this is pretty comfortable, I would rather just kind of stay put within myself here versus challenge what I know is like that next thing towards a more fulfilled life or a more self-compassionate life. Was there ever a point in time where you were really having to pull yourself into that next step? It seems like you kind of just I don't know, glided through the version to version.
That's such a good question. Because when I think about it, right, like it's a balance of having patience and staying consistent and allowing things to naturally grow and build and come to fruition. But at some point you have to take action, right? So let's use the most recent example, leaving Liquid IV. I knew when we got acquired in October of 2020 and the founder of the company who hired me was announcing he was stepping down in 3 months, my heart was like, I'm out. Like, I love Liquid IV but I was in it because of him, because of the relationship I'd built with him. So I knew from that moment, I was like, I need to go find the next thing. But that didn't happen. I just trusted it. I saw a lot of growth opportunity within the company. I was also like navigating myself still as a creator, and I was just like, let's just go with the flow. I moved to Venice, California, which was like the place that I had always dreamed of living in LA. So I was like focusing on life balance now that I was finally picking my head up to breathe, right? All the while knowing this isn't the right career, this isn't my long-term position. So it took 3 years from that moment to finally take the step to go, because I recognized it just wasn't right. The cards didn't line up. I didn't know what the next step would be. I wasn't monetizing myself as a creator or as a business person. So it was like, why am I going to jump off the cliff and know that I'm going to hit the ground? Like there's no way for me to build that plane because I don't even have the blueprint of like where to start. And over that 3 years, I started crafting the blueprint so that when I took this quote unquote leap of faith, it was calculated. I knew like different ways I was going to monetize, and I felt confident in that decision. So I think it's a balance, right? Like the story of how I even got out of Uber. I was ready to be out of Uber for the 2 to 3 years leading up to that moment. And all it was one Instagram story where I posted saying, hold me to it, by the top of 2020, I'm done driving Uber. This is October of 2019. I'm like putting out the world. Give me 2 months, I'm out. Founder of Liquid IV sees it, hits me up, gets on a call with me 3 days later and says, I saw your Instagram story. I want to offer you a full-time role. Got handed a position, didn't even have to interview for it. So it was like, it's a balance of like staying consistent, having patience, trusting the process and the journey, that like you have to do the work, you have to just see how things play out. But at some point you have to like tell the universe, put your hand up and just say like, now is the time that I want this change to happen. So those are like the two examples that I think were the biggest pivotal moments in my career. There were so many micro moments that have obviously added up, but those two stand out the most, where I was like, I'm ready. Like, let's go. And then the universe showed me the way.
Bobby, I'm going to ask you something, and I'm not sure what your answer is going to be. And I normally I know what the answer is going to be when I ask my guest a question, or I have an idea. But my question is, so you mentioned that you've got something coming out on this Friday that you haven't really shared before that is a very sensitive topic. Now, this podcast won't be released for at least probably 3 to 5 weeks. So I think you see where I'm going with this. Can you share a little bit, give us a little preview of what it is that you are just going to be discussing this Friday that is sensitive and maybe a little bit more vulnerable for you to share?
Yeah. When I was in 7th grade, I was sexually assaulted by a best friend. And I tucked it inside for my entire life. And it got to a place where I like completely forgot it even happened, because I had just told myself it wasn't the truth. And through a lot of work last year, post breakup with my girlfriend, and we rebuilt and are back together in a great relationship, I went through a lot of deep work, therapy, a lot of like men's books, just a lot of men's work in general. And through that work with my therapist, we just kept digging to like understanding my childhood. And like, you know, I was very blessed. I grew up in a great family, and I just had a lot of blessings for the environment I was raised in. But still, there was things to unpack and understanding why I am who I am. And through that process, I was able to kind of dig that up and share it with her, then bring it to my partner, Kate. And then a big step was last July when I was home. I was able to share this with my parents. And so it's in the podcast episode. I wrote the script this morning and still have some editing to do, but I just talk about like what that experience was like in real time, what the aftermath looked like for the few years post after that moment, some of the biggest lessons that I realized through that. And I think the biggest thing I hit on is that I actually have a lot of love for this guy rather than hate or anger. And it's just because of the perspective that I have now looking back on it.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing that, like, from the bottom of my heart. And two, I just want to shine a light on what vulnerability really is, because this was not planned. I can almost guarantee, I asked it before we started the show. I like to ask most of our guests, is there anything that you're uncomfortable sharing, you don't want to talk about? Bobby said, I'm an open book. But my guess is that, Bobby, you were not expecting to go there. Let's just say that. And so I just want to really just give you a huge pat on the back for going there and just sharing and being open, and because you don't know who's going to listen to this. And I guess my only question there, so first of all,
can I just
go ahead?
Yeah, I got my 2 cents on that whole thing, Bobby, because I think, one, your vulnerability in this moment is a testament to just how strong and how much growth you've gone through to get to this point, right? Previous versions of yourself probably would not have, definitely to your point, would not have shared that. But, just going to kind of the point of our podcast here is a lot of what we try to do is redefine what strength in a man looks like. And I think today's a pretty much exhibit A primary example of what real strength in a man does look like. And it's not just the vulnerability piece today, but it's also, again, if we were to go back and listen to the first 20 minutes of our conversation, how much you've allowed yourself to grow, how courageous you've been, how many steps you've taken forward towards your passion and towards a fulfilled, self-compassionate life, all the while carrying, a traumatic event and all the baggage and repressed feelings for that long. As somebody who cannot relate to the specific experience, but can relate to carrying baggage in life and needing to work through that, it's heavy, man. And I don't think, done nearly as courageous as things that you've done. So truly inspired. And yeah, thank you for that moment.
Yeah, I appreciate the space. I think one thing that I was writing about this morning when I was writing the script is like, there's peace and freedom. I keep saying the word peace a lot. That's been a big piece, I've been saying the word freedom a lot. And that's a big thing I've been just honing in on more recently. But there's something to be said about owning your truth, owning your story, and not judging yourself for it. Like, that singular experience alone was not something I could have. It happened. It was like uncontrollable. And so there's peace in like not judging myself or not being shameful about it. And also knowing that, like, I looked up statistics today, it's 25% of men have been sexually assaulted. And I'm reading that and I'm like, it's way more, because there's men like me who have never spoken about it or are willing to raise that hand. So yeah, I appreciate you guys holding the space for it. And I think that's just one thing that, I'm looking forward to being able to speak on more in the future, is now that it's out of me, like it just feels.
How does that feel? How does it feel? I mean, you mentioned freedom, but
even when you ask, there's that hesitancy of like, am I ready to go there? And I'm like, yeah, I am, because I'm not judging myself for it, and I feel so authentic. The green light. There were a couple of signals from the universe in the last week or two that was like telling me, I think now is the time to release this, or like put this out there. And the most recent one was I was having a guys' night with two of my buddies, and long story short, I had communicated. We were talking about relationships, and so I admitted to like some of the flaws that I had in my relationship that led us to a breakup before we started repairing. And one of my buddies just made a comment just saying like, man, I so appreciate you just like being open and sharing your weaknesses and vulnerable like that. And for me, it was so natural, because that's just like the practice that I've been on the last, just 8 years of like speaking my truth, putting myself in environments and containers with people that allow you to share these things. And it had become so natural to me that I forgot, like, that's not necessarily the environment other men feel, that they can just share their emotions. So all that to say, like, I feel very comfortable in speaking on it now. And it felt fine to even share it today.
Well, I just I'm again, fist bump number 2 through the screen, and I totally resonate with that piece where, like, I'm sure you probably relate, but it takes, at least for me, it takes a lot to actually, it takes something pretty heavy for me at this point in my life to feel vulnerable in terms of what I'm sharing. And I think what you were saying is what would be super vulnerable for most men or most people in general just feels like a way of life for you. It just feels like the way you walk through life. It feels like, yeah, of course I'm going to like share this, or this is true about me. Like, this is my truth. This is my authentic self. And it's always good to be reminded of just where others are at and where everyone's at in their different seasons of life, and how, while something that might be so comfortable for us, it just serves as a good reminder to continue to put yourself out there, even when it may not even feel like you're putting yourself out there. But I could tell just through the screen that there was it was uncomfortable, and it should be. Like, that is not totally comfortable to share. Like, the first time I came on this podcast and basically came out, if you will, around as it relates to my sexuality, it wasn't totally comfortable. And I thought, it was easier than I thought, but I was still, that was vulnerable. Like, that felt vulnerable. And it would take a lot at this point in my journey to feel like really vulnerable. I could get there. I don't know. I think I'm going to go there today, but I could get there. But my point, I just want to give you your flowers and give you a pat on the back. It's just super inspiring. And the last thing I'll say on that topic is just in question is just, what would you say to anyone else that, because there are others that have experienced this, whether they listen to this podcast or not, and just what would you say if you get one piece of advice, or just one piece to anyone that may be going through any sort of similar abuse or has gone through it?
I'd say that the true path to healing is going to be speaking on it. It's not going to be holding it in. It's not going to be getting angry for what had happened. It's not going to be anything other than being willing to speak on it and share it with someone, whether that's a therapist, a mentor, a friend, a partner, a loved one. It will feel like weight lifted off of your shoulders by even just telling one person. And I think you just have to give yourself that permission to just admit to it and share it. And it's uncomfortable, but through that process, it becomes so much more freeing and comforting because you've allowed that to get out of your body and mind. So it sounds so simple, but I think that is the best thing to do, which is just to speak on it and to share.
It's so simple, but the idea is simple, but the actual task at hand is like the most difficult thing ever. Like, I mean, and as I think about my story, and you said, people have asked me, like, if you could give anyone advice that's, struggling with the same thing you did, it would be like, tell somebody. And if you find somebody you trust, and if you can't find anyone you trust, then talk to a therapist or someone that just getting it out there, like you said, is just such a weight lifted off. It'd be painful. It's going to be super painful, at least for me. It's super, super painful, and there's going to be a big release of emotions that like have been stored up in your body. But it is the first step on a path of acceptance and healing. So I just love everything about that conversation.
Question. I have a question for you before you move on.
Yeah.
A month after you started speaking on the sexuality, how would you describe the emotion you felt in one word?
Whew.
After you got through the uncomfort of sharing it, which we all can imagine, overwhelmed, anxious,
peace,
scared.
Peace.
There it is.
Peace. I mean, I can walk through life. I can walk through life without being in my head about what others are judging me or what they're thinking about me, or if what I say might offend somebody. Like I'm at total peace with who I am. I know that those that are supposed to be in my life will support me for exactly as I am, and those that aren't, that don't support me, whatever it might be, that I'm okay. I'm at peace with that too. So, peace and like you said, freedom. I mean, just the ability to just be, man, to just be in life, which I'm sure that you're feeling a lot of the same. Thank you for asking me that question. It's always good to get a question like that. It's very, very therapeutic to look back on.
Well, your story is just as important for those that, listen to you guys on a weekly basis. I would already just challenge you. I didn't get enough deep into looking at the catalog, but like, if you guys aren't already doing just podcasts, just you two, just talking about your own personal lives and journeys along the way of building the show, more power to you. I would say carve out time for that at least once a month, see how your audience resonates. I get it. I used to do only interview style podcasts for 3 or 4 years, but there's something you said about the people listening right now. Yeah, they love hearing the guests, and maybe there's some catchy names that gets them to click in, but they're ultimately attracted to both of you guys and want to hear what you have to say. So if you haven't already, maybe consider doing, an episode where it's just you two monthly talking about different topics, or, listener Q&As. They want to get to hear part of your guys' story, as I'm sure you're sharing it to, bits and pieces along the way.
Well, that's a sign.
It's a sign from the universe, because we were just talking about that. Our 52nd, 53rd episode, a year of doing it, is going to be released. And the first 3 episodes we did without a guest, and we were thinking about kind of bringing it all back to kind of share what we've learned. And no, that's a sign, man. That the universe works in tremendously beautiful ways, and that's just one way of doing it. Yeah. So I thank you for that feedback. We're gonna switch gears a little bit. You mentioned and we were talking about like we were gonna have like impactful moments, or we're gonna talk about like some super impactful moments on the show, and I just got to shout out, like, this will be one of them, which is crazy. This moment that we had over the last 15-20 minutes will be one of those moments for me. You mentioned living for yourself and not the approval of others. Sounds so simple. In reality, it's awfully hard to do for a lot of us. So how do we do this? How did you do this?
Yeah. It really speaks so much to kind of like this new branding that I've really leaned on the last couple of weeks, which is just design your life. Part of this like new identity is just like, how do you design your life? One of the steps is just truly living a life by your own terms and not living by others. I think you have to go through an experience to like realize what's on the other side of, oh, these people think I shouldn't do this, but I know I want to do it, so I do it, and I feel so glad that I did it, regardless if they don't support it or care, right? And I think, once again, not to be a repeater, but like it was the process of starting to drive Uber full-time and starting a podcast while everyone I graduated with got a full-time career. I was living by my own terms. I was creating this new reality that I wanted to live in, even if no one else was doing the same. And it was through that singular process, when I started to get comfortable with it, that I was like, oh, boom, I'm just going to keep living the way that I want to live. So that was like, if I look back 8 years, that was the singular moment that allowed me to live like that. I'd say before that moment, I was following one foot in front of the other behind what everyone else was doing. I believed what success was, what everyone else was talking about. I did the same things as everyone else. Like, I was a follower. To then, after 2016, I'd say I became truly like the creator of my own life. I started to design the life that I wanted for myself, regardless of what other people were doing. So if I was listening right now and I wanted to live like that, and I didn't know what the first step would be, I would, first off, I would challenge anyone that listens to, as an activity, take a moment and use this as theoretical. If tomorrow you woke up and it was your dream day and your dream life, from the moment you woke up to the moment you went to bed, what would you do? How would you spend your time? Get crystal clear, like 15-minute windows. Like, you wake up at 7, you're in the gym by 7:30, you're eating breakfast by 8:15, you're having coffee by 8:30. Like, break it down to like what that reality looks like. Now you have clarity on what you value and what you want out of your life. From there, I would second step start asking yourself, what do you need to do to start making that dream reality, quote unquote, become your present reality? And then the third and final step is I would do an audit of your environment / who you're hanging out with.
Boom.
If those people are blocks, hurdles, resistance from you doing the thing, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. They probably need to go. You don't need to surround yourself with people that are on the same mission as you. You need to surround yourself with people that respect you for who you are, for what you're interested in doing, as long as you're not, trying to hurt others and cause harm. Like, that's who you need to be around. When I tell the people I'm around, I'm quitting my job, they're not like second guessing me or, trying to hold me back. They're encouraging me. So that's the 3-step process that I would take now. Now knowing what I know is like, you kind of have to have some idea of what you want your reality to look like to then go and create it for yourself. And once you start creating it for yourself, you got to become an expert at saying no to people that are wasting your time and energy so that you can create the space and time for the things that you actually value.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of in line with the next thing I wanted to get into, which was...
Well, can I just add something there? It's just, I want to harp on that point of like, a lot of people know what they don't want. Well, I don't want this. They complain. I don't want this. I know I don't want this. I know I don't want this. Like, this person annoys me, or, I'm not a fan of my job. I don't like this activity. But when you ask them, well, what do you want? Well, I don't know. So everyone knows what they don't want, but not a lot of people have spent the time to actually figure out what you do want. And to your point, the first step is mapping that out. Well, like, what would that look like? What would you be doing? Who would you be with? What type of environment would you be in? So I think that's a great little 3-step process that I will certainly follow, and I think our audience should as well. So I just wanted to point that out before we move topics.
Before we pivot, I also want to say it's not all. I want to add to that. Yes, it's a lack of not knowing, but I think a lot of people know. It's the lack of not doing. You hate the job. You want to do X. What are you doing to switch things up? Probably nothing. Most people aren't actually putting action behind the change that they want to make. So you have to ask yourself, what's the change that I need to make or start making to then get me to what I want? I truly believe that majority of people do have some idea of what they want. They just are not willing to do the work that might be necessary to make it their reality.
Yeah, and I think the biggest catalyst is when people are, quote unquote, their back is against the wall. It's just... There's like this, I love this idea, and I think you really introduced it to me, Matt, which was like the difference between surviving and thriving. And I think there's a lot of comfort and acceptance, or you're inclined to accept a state of survival. You're like, well, this is comfortable. And like, no, it's not perfect. Maybe I'm not the most fulfilled, but like, gosh, that whole thing about thriving is like pretty scary, and it requires a lot of uncertainty, and it requires a lot of, movement that moves away in some ways from a security blanket of that survival state. So you're spot on. Like, I know for me firsthand, yes, there are a lot of people that don't know because they don't seek that purpose out, right? We talked about this. The epiphany doesn't hit till so much later, but there are people like me that I've known for so long. Those light bulbs kept going off, and I just kept putting them out because it just was too uncomfortable for me to go into that. So yeah, it's definitely both. But I want to talk about the people who are thriving. I'm sitting amongst 2 of them right here, the people who are moving towards a career path that is essentially, at least seems rather congruent to what you all would design as your perfect day. I know you're not quite there yet, but you're definitely getting there, and it's like, it's so inspiring to see you two moving towards that. But now you have like a different challenge in my mind, and you touched on this in your content, which is like the 8 emotional traps of an entrepreneur. And this is like a whole new, it's like we unlocked a new boss that we've got to face here. And I want to know how you're thinking about that regret piece of like making sure that you're still prioritizing your well-being, because now you are living every day so passionately. Matt and I were just joking about how busy we were over the weekends with not our actual jobs. And it's like, we can do this stuff all day because it's so energizing, but then how do you make sure that you're continuing to live according to that perfect day, in accordance to your well-being, and not burning out on trying to stand up a really successful coaching practice? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so those emotional traps that I was speaking on are like literally the emotional traps of my ideal clients. That's what they're working through. They're frustrated all because they're not, creating the time for work-life balance. They are stressed out because they're not carving out the time for family and relationships, right? So for me, if we're speaking on well-being habits, going to the gym, meditating, journaling, those have become automatic in my life. It's not a question of if I'm going to do them, I do them. And I do them so effortlessly because of how I design them into my life. So when I wake up in the morning, the first 2 hours of my day, minus walking my dogs, is on me. Like, I get back at 6:45 from walking the dogs and feeding them, and it's immediately into 20-minute meditation, 10-minute brain game to warm up the mind, journaling, manifestation journaling, right to the gym, back, shower, have a cup of coffee, start the day. When I have intentionally created them to be in the first part of my day, this win the morning, win the day philosophy that I've been living by, there's no other option but for me to do them. So I fill my cup up first every morning, which allows me to feel my best self mentally, physically, spiritually for the entire day ahead. So if we're speaking on well-being, it's like, how do you create that in your own day, right? I think, I'm not saying you have to be an early bird and get up at 5 a.m., but I would argue that there's no better time to get fitness in than the first thing in the morning. Because if you try to do it in the afternoon, or if you try to do it at the end of the day, there's so many other things that are going to pull you away from it. You're now tired. You got more work, emails blowing you up. I got to keep working on this project. So you push it off. 1 week, 2 weeks, a month. Now it's like, it's not part of you anymore. So I made it part of my identity by just putting it as the first thing I do every day, and it's a non-negotiable, and I just do it.
Yeah, I love it. And did you?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So and then another piece of your content then was like about beating procrastination, which, by the way, this conversation's like free coaching, by the way. Like Bobby Hobert, again, go follow him on Instagram. I'm just bringing up his content. Phenomenal. But one of the things that jumped out, again, the timing of all of this is really weird. Within 24 hours, I'm reading your content about beating procrastination, and I felt the brunt of procrastination yesterday. And I was telling Matt about this yesterday because one of the things you talked about was in how you structure your day. You have a very fixed time block for working hours. It's like from 9 to 6. And the part that jumped out to me was how that creates an internal pressure to make sure that you're getting things done on deadlines that you're setting for yourself. And yesterday, I had way too much on my plate that I saved for Sunday. I did not beat procrastination. Well, I did in the end, but one of the things that you just mentioned that was very applicable to me was I'm really trying to work on making my sleep time and my amount of sleep, my bedtime, and the amount of sleep I get as a non-negotiable. It's something I've struggled with so poorly because it's one of the easiest things to compromise.
Yes.
And part of what helped is, like you said, scheduling out your next morning and then having to then backward solve the bedtime. Well, I felt this internal pressure because I still had so much work to get done. And I realized I was trying to beat the clock for my bedtime, a non-negotiable, something I determined was going to be non-negotiated with. And so, like, rather than stay up late, I decided to just look back at all of it and realize, like, hey, the solve here is not to compromise a value, the health, the sleep. The solution here, rather, is to assess and realize, like, hey, Mike, you need to manage your time way better. You need to spread this out across the week. And, like, this is a learning. You don't have to have this perfect routine overnight. And I think that's the part of being, like, self-compassion, and having some grace with yourself to, like, figure this stuff out. But anyway,
There's a self-compassion piece. I was going to call it out as you said it.
Yeah.
Let me jump in on that. Let me jump in on that.
Go ahead.
So what you said, right? So couple things that already stand out, right? Like you even said it yourself. I set myself up for failure by expecting to get more done than I probably could. So what's also really important for me is I'm extremely realistic about what I can do in a day. And by being realistic, by having a set start and stop time, it creates the healthy pressure to get shit done in an effective and efficient manner. After this podcast convo, I'm done for the day. Is there more to do? Absolutely. Is there more content to be created, more emails to be sent, more text to be responded to, more IG posts? Yes, yes, yes. But I'm just realistic about what I can accomplish in a day. And when I do that, it allows me to compartmentalize. It's time to shut it down at 6 p.m. CST. It's time to have dinner, go for a walk with my girl and our dogs, relax for the night, recharge, and make sure that I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. Because oftentimes we think, like you said, cross out the things that we value most to make more room and time for quote unquote business and to-do lists and productivity. But we're not factoring is that, yes, we got an additional hour of work done, but how much is that going to affect us and how we feel for the next 24 hours? You feel night and day difference from 8 hours of sleep to 7. So why not give yourself that additional hour to feel great for the next 24 hours? And it allows you to be more productive. And also too, last thing I'll say is there's studies that have shown that humans have on average 5 hours of focus work per day within them. So what does that mean? Like today is a great example. I went hyper focus mode for like probably 4 to 5 hours. Like there were little breaks in between, but I went all in. And after that, around 2 p.m., I knew I'm done. I can still answer emails. I can still like catch up on some like organizational logistical stuff, but I'm not going to expect myself to create my best output because I have tapped myself out. So I'm realistic about what I can accomplish in the day. I'm realistic about when I'm on E and when I need to take my foot off the gas. And I do not cave to the values, the sleep, the eating good, the prioritizing my well-being. It all adds up. So all that to say, I would challenge you, keep that like guardrail in place, because with time you're going to become so much more in tune with like, this is going to take me 20 minutes. This is going to take me 15 minutes. I didn't even check my Instagram today. People probably wouldn't believe this, right? I'm a social media guy. I'm a content creator. My business done through social media. I woke up at 6 a.m. today. What time do you think I checked Instagram today?
Well, you said you didn't.
Sorry. What I was
did once?
At is,
I thought it was a trick question. All right, 11 a.m.
12:42.
Had me beat. Okay.
At the minute, 12:42.
12:42.
Well, and then
I looked real quick right when I opened it up. I was like, oh, I should actually post this. So I posted my story. Most of you might be surprised to know that I build my business online, but yet I don't even check social media until today. It was 12:42 because I'm clear on what I need to do and I prioritize that.
My favorite part is before this conversation, you told us you have a hard stop at 6 Central.
I thought about that too.
And I'm just in love with why now. Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure you get out of here by then. I want to respect that boundary.
No, it's exactly that.
Yeah, I think the last
boundaries. You got to create. It's boundaries. That's all it is, right? Boundaries. We know these to be true. Like set a bedtime. What am I? 12 years old again? Yeah, you are. Set the damn bedtime. It will make the difference. Have the hard cutoff time.
The last piece I like about that is just like you said, you're very realistic with yourself. And I think that's just so important because people get these short bursts of motivation so often where it's like, oh, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to hit a 5:30 hit class, and then 6:30 to 7:30 I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to do that all week, and I'm going to work out 7 days a week, and I'm going to eat clean. I'm not going to miss a meal.
3 years.
And you're just setting yourself up to fail, and you're setting yourself up to let yourself down. So I think, that's been super big on my journey too, is I'm just extremely realistic with myself. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not a superhuman. Like I know I have limitations, and I just schedule and try to structure my day around those limitations that I'm still working in, of course, but that optimize my productivity. But I just think it really people can spiral from that when you it's like this motivation, like I got this, like I'm doing it for a full week straight. I'm not eating a chip, and it's just like, just be realistic. Like just be realistic.
Sustainable consistency.
Yes. That's how we're gonna wrap this one off. We got 3 rapid fire questions for you, Bobby. First of all, just thank you so much for sharing your story, some wisdom, and for your vulnerability, man. It was just super inspiring, very heartwarming, and just good to know that there's people like yourself out there that are willing to step into an arena of just extreme vulnerability. So I just want to acknowledge that. The first question for you is, what is either the best piece of advice you've been given or a favorite quote?
It immediately came to my heart, and I think it was one of the most important things that I kept reminding myself when I graduated college and I was driving Uber and starting this podcast. And I just remember my father growing up, always saying to me, no matter what it is no matter what it is that you do with your life, as long as you support it, excuse me, I'm butchering this quote. No matter what it is that you want to do with your life, as long as you love it, we will support you. And that was really, really important advice. And
dude, that'll make you, that'll send you to places you never thought you could go.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to get that at a young age.
Really, all a kid needs sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had kids I was graduating college with that like were telling me straight up that they were working at X company and they didn't want to, but their mom and dad were forcing them. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? You're 22 years old and you're working a job because your parents are telling you." When I told my parents, "Hey, I'm driving Uber and I'm going to start a podcast," they said, "Great. Just know your college loans kick in 6 months. It's on you. But we support you. If that's what you want to do, go for it." Very fortunate.
That's awesome.
If I was in the reverse, it would have been a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it goes to the auditing of the environment. Second question. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
All right. I'm going to go alive because that gets it really complicated. Alive. There's three people that really there are three people that weren't directly in my circle that have played a pivotal role in those first 3 or 4 years of my career. And if it wasn't for them, I think it would have been I would have found a way to get to where I'm at, but like they were outside mentors without them even knowing me. 2 of which who I've ended up befriending, which is a massive accomplishment. The third one, who I would choose dinner with, who I've met a few times but never really had like a deep dive with, would be Gary Vee.
Oh, yeah.
I just have a lot of gratitude for that man because it was his 2016, 2017, 2018 like daily V vlog and his content, his podcasts that were like my fuel to the fire every day. He felt like my daily mentor, and that would be the one I would want to have dinner with.
Yeah, he's awesome, man. I watched a lot of his stuff not growing up, but more recently too. Leslie, just what do you like to do? What are hobbies? Like, what do you like to do in your free time? What kind of fulfills you?
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good question. I'm like, what do I do in my free time? It's interesting. Like, I'd say travel, food, outdoors, like anything that's getting the body moving. Love coffee. Like my girl and I will go try different coffee shops here in Austin. Pickleball, we haven't been playing much of it, but it's interesting because I've intentionally like crafted this lifestyle of mine where I look at my hobbies as like part of my life now.
Yeah.
That's weird, right? But like I value running as much as I value this podcast right now, or I value when we went on a Sunday adventure to check out, a local small town here in Austin. I value that as much as I value meditating earlier. Like these hobbies and interests have all just evolved as like all as
a way of being.
Yeah, it's a way of being. That's a good way to say it. A way of being, but and it changes with time too, of course.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks again, Bobby. We're going to sign off here, guys. Really appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.